Okay, good afternoon. This is a work session for Wabash City Schools. It's October 30th at 5 p.m. Roll call.
Everyone is present.
With that, I'll call the meeting to order. Revisions, we're approving revision 2-A on the board agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the revision, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, revision passes. We have no one in the audience, so I won't worry about that. Well, let's get to the work session. Okay, the board will discuss board goals. Now, I don't know how many of you we can just go in.
Yep.
Okay. Did anybody get a chance? I got 65% according to Kindle
Yeah.
through that book. Did anybody else get a chance to read it?
I had gotten about this much.
That's probably about where I'm at. Right about in there.
It's a
Which-
long book.
Huh?
It's a long book.
Yeah.
Which this shit goes back too far. Is far enough to know like how to set the goals and stuff. And so it suggests 1 to 3 goals.
Yep.
And they need to be student outcome based.
Mhm.
So Amy and I were talking in our pre-board meeting, and this is what I was thinking too as I was reading the book. I want it to be, in my thoughts, it's gonna be, we want our students' scores to go up.
Yeah.
So I think it should be based on that. And it says the time frame needs to be like no less than 3 years to reach your goal. So it says it should be something specific like I don't know what it is.
So like by the year this,
Smart.
yeah.
Now it is
Student
this
scores
percent and
will
it
go
will
from-
be
yeah.
this percent, in 3 years.
The
So,
one thing that I thought of when I was reading this, our first survey for strategic plan went out, I think it was Monday this week. And I almost wondered if taking the time throughout the rest of this year for our board to finish the book and kind of like talk about what our goals are going to be, but using the strategic plan also as a
Yeah.
way
That's a good idea.
to set
yeah,
our
the board
goals.
stresses that we're to represent the values of the community and what they want.
Mhm.
So this will tell us what is a priority for them, which I would think higher scores and our students being able to read at least on grade level,
Yeah.
I would think would be a value of the community. So,
Another thing I took from it was it talked about that as a board member, understanding various student outcomes, when we look at assessment data, different things, because you're not an educator, you may not understand those things.
Yeah.
And so it made me wonder, as we are going to various trainings, would it be valuable for our board members to, not all of you, but maybe you go to a training on PLC, maybe you go to a training on RTI, just to give the board a better understanding of those and how our teachers are using those strategies and tools to help our students improve. I thought, our literacy coach, maybe having a time where she comes
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
and just kind of talks about what it is that she is doing and what she's focusing on. But just to help build that capacity and understanding what our teachers are doing and how we're assessing, and then how we're using that data to drive instruction and improvement.
I think that would be helpful
Yeah, I
actually,
think
because
so.
I hear complaints and things from teachers about, and it's like, I don't have a full understanding of what those are, so it would be helpful to.
Yeah. I mean, I might have a little bit of different version of that because I have a teacher in the house, but it's still like somewhat a different language because it's not my world. So I don't need to necessarily know it as deep as teachers, but to know it better than I do now is definitely something that would be of value.
I mean, and like, when I say like our goals are going to be that our every student will read on reading level or above in 3 years, that's not up to us to figure out how to do. It's up for Amy to figure out, according to the book.
Yeah.
It's up to Amy to figure that out. We just need to set the goals. These are your guardrails, which
Yes.
means you have to stay within this lane. This is what you can't do, and she figures out how to do that and gets that on board. I mean, it's a little more on her, but this is one of her goals anyways too, was
Sure.
higher test scores. So does anybody else have any other thoughts on,
I think that's good. I would love some training on how we do
Mhm.
that and how you guys plan on raising those test scores. And I think, and I know I have a daughter in 3rd grade, but you know, we tested in 2nd grade, so I'd love to see those scores at the end of how many students we get up to reading level this year. Or not reading level, but to pass that I read.
I think it's important to, and you hit on that, our job as a board is to create policy, not to get into the weeds. So it's one thing to have an understanding, it's another thing to take that understanding and then try to get in the weeds saying you gotta do this, this, and this.
Right.
That's not our role.
Mhm.
The role is to set the goals and tell Amy, the leadership group, this is what we want. The policy, the goals for the organization, and it is their responsibility. And if those aren't being met, then Amy's going to have to be able to answer that. But that doesn't mean that we're going to teachers or we're going to the classrooms and we're getting our nose into things that we shouldn't be. We're at 60,000 foot. We're not at 5,000 feet.
Right.
Yeah, have you gotten this at all, or, okay, so basically, that's kind of the premise of some of this that I've gone through, is the guardrails, we're helping to assess.
It's
we're
easy
creating
to
the
well,
guardrails.
it's easy to read things. It's easy to see that,
No, I
hey,
know.
this is what it's saying.
Yeah,
And then once you get going, getting into the weeds where you don't need to be. And that's going to be, I think, on Amy to come back and say to whoever, if somebody gets into the weeds that they shouldn't, then she needs to make that known, whether that's through the board president or the other board members, because that's not our job. Our job is to set policy and make sure that that policy is being followed, but not to get into the weeds on those things.
Well, we'll have to have some I think it's suggested 3 or 4 times a year, like an assessment and then a report to the board. So we'll have to be monitoring like that to see if it's actually happening. But, and Amy had also suggested maybe something for, our high schoolers to because you're hoping they're reading at grade level by then, but something college and career focused,
Yeah, with
something
everything
for our
we offer
graduates.
through dual credits, we should have a goal that our students are leaving with a certain number of dual credits. And, or some
If
type
they're
of
college focused,
certification
yeah.
from Heartland, to make sure that our high school students are being directed into a path that's going to lead to them to be able to get a job, to go to college, to enlist, whatever their choice may be. So I think it's not just focusing on our test scores, but on our students leaving ready to be for their future.
And then for those that aren't going into college and, maybe even it's stuff, and I don't know, maybe we do stuff like, this is how you fill out an application and this is how you do this. So it can be, some focus on that too. And just preparing for life.
And
as
our
an
high
adult.
school does that. I went last year and
Uh-huh.
did a session with every senior on how to do a resume
Uh-huh.
and shared with them that, where you're at in your career, your resume looks different.
yes.
When you're first out of high school, first out of college, you're focusing on I went to college and this is the degree I have. And I showed them my resume after, 20 plus years in education. You don't care about what my education was. You want to know what experience I had that was going to make a difference for the school district. And so shared those with them. So they do different trainings like that through our early college programming.
Okay. So that's 2 goals, possible goals. Is there anything else that maybe we could consider?
Well, I think in the book, didn't it say, you have a math and a reading goal.
Okay.
And so that would be math, reading, and then college and career. It listed 3
Yeah,
that
that's-
could be a focus, which I thought were kind of ironic because I thought that goes right along with what we're doing.
It's really kind of the first time it's been done, right? We don't really have board
do we
goals,
now?
so we gotta start somewhere.
Even when you look at our strategic plan poster up there, when you look at some of the things that are on there,
When I first came on the board 7 years ago, we had a work session where we talked about the pillars. I think there was 5 pillars
yeah.
that we followed that
Yeah,
in essence were the goals that we were to, but nothing was specifically laid out. It was more of
our
Or
broad.
if even there wasn't any accountability.
Well, there certainly
accountability
wasn't
to
any, no, there
those.
wasn't any of that. I mean, that's just like our mission statement
Yeah.
reads, but what metrics are we using to ensure that we're meeting that? That's
Right.
always been something that I think if we have a mission statement, if we have goals, if we have a strategic plan, there needs to be some metrics that we can look at and see if we're attaining that.
Mhm.
If we just come up with these grandiose ideas and say, this is what we want to accomplish, and there's no metrics to show how we're accomplishing that, what good is it?
Sounds good on paper.
Second half of the
It's
book.
gotta have-
And that's, yeah, in my
Yeah.
experience with a strategic plan, you set your mission and vision, and then you come up with, 2 to 4 to 5 action steps. These are the things that we're gonna do, to meet the 3 or 4 goals that we've come up with. And like you said, you have ways of measuring, you have deadlines, this is when we wanna accomplish this. And it's over a 5-year period, and each year, there's some type of report out to show the progress that they've made. That doesn't mean that, we're gonna see test scores go from here to here in 1 year, but what are we doing to make incremental improvement in our district?
And then two, along with item B, how can we highlight that improvements and, keep the excitement going and, work those into our board meetings?
Well, not just your board meetings, but how do you work that into getting the word out to the community? So
Mhm.
everybody from the community watches the board.
Markets.
Right.
We've got to market that. You're not telling your story. Somebody else is going to tell a story about you that you don't want told.
Mhm.
And that isn't necessarily true.
Well, that was what I was meaning. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else on that one, on A? All right, moving on to B. Oh, so back to A. So as Amy gets the results, she said they're due by November 15th.
Yeah, and then how we're gonna go through and break down that data. And then I've talked with the leadership team. The 4 building principals will be a member of the steering committee. And then, from there, we're gonna determine, do we wanna bring in some small group focus groups, talk to, some of our parents. Probably will include some of you, on different, meetings, get more data. We also have surveyed our staff, so we will include that as well. We haven't talked yet about surveying our students. If we do, I feel like it would be high school students. I think they could give us some valuable input that would help. And then once we are able to start looking at, so what are our focus areas that we need to decide goals on? As we work on these, once we've hammered them all out, we will present them to the board. And then once goals have been approved, then action steps would be created.
When do you think it's a realistic timeline for setting the goals?
The goals are, we hope to have the strategic plan completed and in place, board approved by July, that it's starting next school year. This is what we are doing.
Has this gone out to any other key stakeholders in the community? Like Grow Wabash?
It hasn't, but I wondered if there is a way that Grow Wabash might be able to send it to, because I wondered if we could get input from local businesses
I
as
think
well.
that'd be important and give us a different perspective, That's kind of what's my thought on that too.
Well, they are part of the community
Yeah.
too, so.
Yeah.
They're hiring our kids,
They're hiring-
they're graduates, it's important.
So I'll reach out to Grow Wabash and see if there's a way that they can push a survey out to businesses.
Thank you.
Board will discuss the organization of board work sessions and board meetings for 2025. Okay, so one thing about the author of this book, he stressed that you should have, I believe, 60% or more of your board sessions be focused on student outcomes. So in order to do that, we would need to have, go down to one, official board meeting, and then have the other one be in here, where we talk about the all the hirings and the minutia of what our board meetings usually consist of. And then what we put them in the consent agenda, then for our regular schedule, for our meeting over there. And approve it like that. That way we don't have to go through it all. It could just be part of the consent agenda to be voted on. And then maybe the rest of our time can be spent on student outcomes. Now, how do we incorporate, what are some ideas for student outcomes that we could have in our board meetings?
Well, I think that would be things such as just our reports on, we most likely will no longer be doing NWEA because of the change in iLearn. That's gonna be, the iLearn checkpoint, and our middle school is piloting that this year. So 3 times a year, we'll have that. That would be student outcomes that we would be able to present, share where we're at and how we're using that data. When we do PSAT, SAT, we get that information. At the end of each quarter, we can share student attendance, we can share, high school credits earned, dual credit, that would be at the end of the semester. Dual credits that have been earned, just credits in general that have been earned. So I think there's a lot of things that we could talk about that we don't talk about now.
Because one meeting a month, we're gonna need some
Yeah,
student
I think
outcomes.
so.
Well,
Yeah.
we have the SAT day. I mean, I
Yeah.
never once heard how our kids fare on that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Other than they all take it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
or it's coming up.
Yeah.
And
even focusing on what our students are doing. So I've talked to the leadership team, having each school be assigned to a board meeting, that your school, that's your spotlight. So
yeah,
what things are happening? Do you have students that you want to bring in and recognize? Like, when we have we've had kids that have scored a perfect score on something. Let's recognize those things.
kids who, took 5% up on their grade level, on their
Yeah.
reading level or something. It doesn't have to be the top of the top even.
Or their attendance improved, or,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah,
Clubs,
anything.
that's
Yeah.
another thing, that's other clubs that we don't always see or.
Mhm.
Just notice like the athletics.
And I think we would continue with our student, council kids coming in.
Yeah.
I think that's, good.
I think it would be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Didn't you say that OJ was gonna do some student council?
They do, but they only do it like twice a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it would be important that at least once a year we get a report from our SRO. We get a report from our chief nurse. We get a report from our Melanie, cafeteria. And then from Chad,
Yeah, building maintenance.
building maintenance.
Where are we at, what
I
do we
think,
need?
I think it would be
That's a good
important
idea.
for each of them, at least once a year, transportation.
Now,
At
would that
least-
be done in a work session? No,
It could be,
Yeah, that's
or
probably,
that's more of a,
they might actually feel a little more comfortable in that setting
Yeah.
than,
Right.
than coming to City Hall. But I do think that
yeah,
these are areas that we as a board don't get updates on
Mhm.
very often. I know some send out a annual report or whatever, but I think it would be nice for them to come before us and give a report or an update, and then we could ask questions, because those are areas we never really hear from.
right.
I agree with that.
So I have talked to leadership that, having a school spotlight, I think that's something that having them there where they can share and highlight what's going on.
I think something we may want to do as we look at staff, and I don't want to just limit it to teachers, but maybe once a month we recognize a staff member.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to just be teachers, it could be a custodian, it could be
Yeah.
anybody that works in the organization that, maybe their colleagues
Or we could-
recommend them,
Or could be
just-
student nominated too, and then
yeah,
a student
somebody
could come and
nominate,
present them with their,
but something that we're recognizing our staff on a regular basis. I know we do it at the end of the year where they have the teacher of the year and staff member of the year, those type of things. But I think if we did things like that a little more often, wouldn't take a lot of time,
Correct.
and I think it would go a long way to helping our folks know how important they are
Mhm.
and how we got,
That's
how
a
much
good
we
idea,
value
too.
them.
So how this would work then is we would still have our board meeting on the Wednesday, the third Wednesday, the third Monday. And then the work session would happen maybe the Tuesday before.
Of the same week?
No,
The week
so,
before.
Okay.
so, yeah, the board meeting would be on Monday, the Tuesday before that would be the work session, and we can hold that here. I think this is more conducive to a work session where we can be in this environment.
Yeah,
Those would be, live streamed just like our, board meetings are. We have space where we can have visitors if they want to attend. And then like Rhonda said, everything that we discuss, HR, finance, field trips, overnight field trips, all the, rentals that people have asked for, all those things that we can just talk about them here, those go on the consent agenda, and then at the board meeting, that's approved. And then we're able to move into those.
So if there was something that was just, you wouldn't vote on anything at the work session?
No, we're just talking about
But
it.
if there was something that, say, I didn't agree with, that was put in the consent agenda, then I would have to vote against approving the consent agenda as a whole because of that one thing that was wrapped up in it, and I really wouldn't have any opportunity to discuss it.
We would
for the
discuss it here.
broader- Well, I understand that, but we wouldn't have the opportunity to discuss that in an open forum in a board meeting setting.
Or would you be able to just take that off the
Yeah.
consent agenda and add it to
Table
the
it.
normal agenda? at that
So you would ask, I would have to ask, because if you're saying everything in the work session is gonna be wrapped up in the
Right.
consent agenda for approval, then I would have to ask Rhonda or whoever the president is to make it an actual item separate from the consent agenda. I'm just trying to
I think
ask.
Yeah, that's
the
a good
logistics.
question. That's a good question. That might be a Jordan question.
Yeah,
How do we flesh that out?
yeah.
Is
Why don't
that-
we just make it a separate item, that way there can be
More
more
discussion.
discussion,
Well,
more
but
discussion,
I-
or that way you can there could be this single item I'm voting no
We're
for.
talking about this now and we're all right here, but
Yeah.
down the road, if this is the format we go to, there's gonna be new board members that may not, they're gonna have to be told that. So
Yeah.
somebody's gonna have to make sure new board members understand this is how that works then.
Let me do some research on that about if something is on a consent agenda and do you just vote no for the whole consent agenda, or can you pull out one and make that an actual item on the next board
Yeah.
meeting? Put everything else into
I
the
don't know why
consent
we couldn't,
agenda.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because there could be things that we,
Disagree.
we disagree on in a work session, and if it all gets rolled into a consent agenda, you don't wanna
For sure.
vote
Be
no
the one
to
to vote no for
everything,
all
and
the
then you don't
hirings,
want, well,
yeah.
you don't want to vote no and not really have an opportunity to speak to why you're voting no.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
good
makes
point.
sense. That's a good question.
Would that also pertain to things that you have to abstain from?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, because that will potentially happen.
Or when you abstain, you could just say, I am abstaining from, well, I don't even know, how would it go in the, it would just be, how would
the
it?
following items are on the consent agenda, the HR report, the financial report.
Okay, so you
like-
could just say, I abstain from the vote because of item something, and so
Yeah.
then you're abstaining from, but then they're abstaining from the entire vote.
Yeah, let me, like I said,
Yeah.
let me
Yeah.
check with Lisa
Good point,
Tanzel at the state.
So I get paid the big bucks.
Yeah,
Look for another month and a half.
three-time president right there. For another month. Whatever. He secretly reapplied.
I heard they put another application.
Yeah, she's gonna surprise us.
Surprise!
Surprise.
Did they already, they haven't had the interviews yet.
We're on item B.
But did they
We're on item B.
chase it?
I don't know right now.
Okay, so I think that, I mean, it sounds like if we move in that direction, we will, at the first board meeting in January, make our decision of when our meetings are gonna be held. So we've got some time to flesh out some of these things that we have questions on.
Would we have to do another work session to flesh those out, or can that be an agenda item to discuss? You know what I'm saying?
Well, what we may need to do is the first board meeting in January, that would be an agenda item. And then we discuss it there.
No, what he's saying, are we gonna have another work session
To
to
flesh it out before
everything
we
out
approve
before
it.
the meeting? Or are we gonna put it in like a November board meeting to discuss it there? Or should we do
Yeah.
another work session?
My thought is have it fleshed out before we get to this January, so that it's figured out, and then approve or disapprove, or whatever the word is there, of it in January, as that's the direction. we're taking.
The plain devil's advocate.
Yeah.
If you flesh it out here, you're gonna vote on something that a new board member is not gonna have any idea about.
That's true.
So,
So the month of January may have to look status quo.
Yeah, no, that's
Until.
fine.
Yeah. Okay, like I said, that gives me time to find out about like, how does that work with the consent agenda? If
Sure.
someone needs to abstain, or if there's an item that they don't wanna, that they're not gonna approve, but does that mean they just say no to the whole consent agenda? My experience is it was boards of 7, so when one didn't, it probably didn't make that big of a
Didn't make a big
difference,
difference.
yeah. So,
Any other thoughts on that? Okay, board will discuss Heartland Career Center roofing proposals.
so I printed out the information, they had bids, the Heartland Board of Managers went through those bids and selected 2. They were looking to get a metal roof. Fort Wayne Roofing was the only one that quoted a metal roof. And so the Board of Managers actually chose them for the metal. And then they chose, if we decide not to do metal, instead do the 2-ply, the AAA roofing company. So this is a breakdown of what the expenses will be. Over the last several years, the schools that own Heartland have been putting money into a roofing account. And so that's when it talks about like 2-ply with amount left. So they've been using that fund to pay for some of the different like, I don't know, expenses that they've incurred so far with, having people come out, look at what needs to be done, architects, that kind of stuff. So they're wanting to know, do we want to use that money and apply it to the cost of this? Or do we want to do it and not use that money and save it for a future project? I don't know if you want to add anything from the meetings that you've been at.
No, the only other thing that you didn't mention was that it is a complete tear off of the roof.
So it's ground up, basically on the roof.
And the reason most of these didn't do the metal quote is because of something funky on the roof. They didn't think
There's some
that.
kind of beam.
Yeah, there's some kind of beam. It was like way over my head, construction talk, and I didn't quite get it, but
So the one didn't think they could because of whatever this thing
there's
is, but
some
the
beam
other
you
thought it
gotta
was
go
fine.
around. The other one was like, we can still do a metal roof, but that beam is not a big deal.
what's on it now?
It's a 1-ply.
Yeah,
Oh.
and it's, yeah.
1-ply, what does that mean, 1-ply?
It's some type of membrane
The
that
type
they put
of-
down.
Floyd's preference is the metal roof. If that means anything.
If I were Floyd, that would be.
Yes, sure it is.
Yeah, Probably.
So you can see, they've broken it
Yeah.
down. If we go with the metal roof, if we don't use the funds that are left in that account, our share is $201,563. If we use what's left in that roofing fund that Heartland has, we would owe $181,921. If we go with the other,
You're good.
okay, if we go with the other, the 2-ply, not using the fund, we would owe 141,978, but if we use the fund, we would owe 122,335. So again, tonight, we're not making any decisions.
Right.
Um,
There are three decisions that he wants us to make. One is, do we use the metal or the 2-ply? Two is, do we leave the money in an account for further maintenance and pay the full? And then 3 would be, use the money that we've been putting in. And
Where did the money come from that's in that roofing fund? Where did it come from?
when we pay each month, we pay an amount in January, and then we pay an amount each month. They factored it in, and I think they've been collecting this for several years.
Because they knew they needed a roof.
Yeah,
Okay.
And the only other thing that I was thinking is the 2-ply roof, they're giving us like a 20, maybe 30-year warranty on. The metal roof is a 50-year warranty.
one thing
So
that
it
they
is
did
50.
talk about when they do, eventually they're gonna have to do HVAC. And I know that there was some concern that with the metal roof, is it going to cause that to be more expensive because of what they have to do on the roofs
Sure.
and it being metal, so.
So you said, how long was the warranty for the 2-ply?
20 to 30. I think they can stretch it to 30. I'm not sure.
Okay, so we'd have to replace it again in 30 years, or with the metal roof, it'd be 50 years, so we get twice as much, basically.
Unless you have to do something different because of the HVAC.
Yeah.
I think their current one's pretty old.
The current roof,
Yeah.
real old, like over 30 years, I think. They're
So-
really,
So a 1-ply has worked for 30 years.
yeah.
Not necessarily the best.
Right.
They've been
There's been some
patching it.
tornadoes
Lots of
out that way.
Yeah.
So what do you mean, in case they have to do something different with HVAC, would that like kind of null part of the warranty then?
Yes.
If we had to,
Well, if they have to, if you have to go in and you have to redo things, might be a lot more
Basically,
difficult, to do it with a metal and replace that and fix around where you're putting the HVAC in than what it would be with a 2-ply.
but would it
I don't know the
negate
answer
some
to
of the
that.
warranty then? If we have to make alterations to the roof for the HVAC?
I would imagine that if they're having to do something, they're gonna have to bring that roofing company in and have them do it. That's where I'm wondering if it could
Yeah.
cause the HVAC projects to be more
Be more
expensive
expensive
because
because
they're
of the
having
roofing.
to.
And those aren't cheap to begin with.
Uh-huh.
I mean, my opinion on the roofing fund, it's a roofing fund. The money should be used for the roof. So if we're putting a new roof on, there shouldn't be a whole lot of maintenance that has to be
For
done
several years.
for several years. So you should use the funds that have been put in that for this to address it. Because you shouldn't, if you put a new roof on, you shouldn't have to worry about maintenance for the short term.
But
It says
wasn't he,
here, it says funds for the roof project or put into a scholarship fund. What's that?
They do scholarships for their graduates. And so a lot of the money that they get, that's actually another thing we have to vote on.
Yeah, that'll just be an item on
Okay.
the board meeting.
I'll talk about that at the board meeting. But they do like
So if
extra funds that they get through,
So if we
like the
don't
NIPSCO
use-
project could potentially
Okay.
go into a scholarship fund.
So
So
was
the
he-
funds that we've been giving to the roofing fund could be,
Could be used as.
is that what Floyd was saying, maintenance versus just any general maintenance, not necessarily maintenance on the roof?
I don't think it.
I think it
necessarily-
was, if we don't use it on the roof, we will save it for our next big project we
Project.
need to do.
I don't think it had anything to do with roof.
The other thing had
Okay.
to do with
Okay.
the money. for the
Maintenance
maintenance.
in general.
So yeah, it's earmarked as maintenance, not roof only.
Correct.
Okay,
But right now it's,
that's what they're looking at.
It's
It's
just
just earmarked for the roof if we want it to go to
Okay.
that.
Okay.
is anybody leaning any one way?
my opinion, just because of the cost, I would say, my opinion would be go with the 2-ply and use the roofing funds. That would be my opinion. I mean, when I think of some of the expenses that we have as a as a district, that makes the most sense for us.
Yeah, we have to think of ours too.
And a 30-year warranty
Is-
on a roof is a pretty good,
And
so if you can get another 30 years, if you can get 30 years out of a new roof, I think that's definitely acceptable.
Are there any questions that you want me or Kristen to go back to Floyd with before our meeting on Monday when you vote?
No, I think this is really well laid out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments about that? About like, along with what Rod was saying, or their opinion on which one? I
If
think
you
that's-
disagree with me, you're not
No, I
gonna
think
hurt my
that's
feelings. You're not gonna hurt my
valid.
feelings.
No,
if you
it's
disagree
that's what
with
this
me.
is for.
Especially
That's
with
what-
HVAC issues.
I think that's
If
a
we're gonna have
valid
an
point.
issue, why would you put a metal roof on?
And
Yeah.
especially if it's gonna cause more difficulty to put the HVAC in.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my struggle is. I like a metal roof. I like
I've got
mine.
I've got
I got a metal roof.
on my
Yeah.
house.
I really like that metal
Me
roof.
too.
But I also like the fact that don't like the fact it's gonna probably cost more money to do more maintenance with the HVAC because of that.
Well, I would think that there would be some concern that nobody else was willing to
Bid it out.
bid out a metal roof except for this one company.
And that was my concern, because I think going into it, the company that he used really felt like we were gonna get several bids for metal roofs, and when
Yeah.
only one came in, that's kind of what I thought was.
It's a flag, isn't it?
Yeah. So that will be on the board agenda for Monday, and we can have more discussion about it, and we will make our vote on that, and then we'll take that back to the Heartland Board. of
So on
Ed.
Monday,
And
we
it's
vote
the
on
same
which,
as anything else, the majority of what the
Yeah.
school board is the
Correct.
direction we go.
So we
So
might have
if
to.
3 vote to go with the metal and not to use the funds, we're
Yes.
on the hook for it.
Yeah.
so we're saying we're voting for which kind of roof we want.
Correct.
And-
And
the-
if
And
the
we're gonna
funds.
use the reserves,
Okay.
yes, so. Okay,
All right, good discussion. Well, that's all for our agenda. So with that, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
on the gavel.
37 minutes.
What?
37 minutes, that would have been
Hey,
an hour.
we are efficient.
Got it down.